Joining us now, Sidney Powell. Now you know Sidney. She's been on our show many times. She has a very long and impressive resume. And rather than me tell you what it is, I'll let her tell you what it is. Sidney, welcome.
Thank you so much, John. Good morning to you in one of my favorite states of Virginia.
Well, good. Now, tell us all your tremendous credentials and tell us about your book.
Well, my book is called License to Lie, Exposing Corruption in the Department of Justice, which would shed a lot of insight on the department's actions in trying to prosecute Governor McDonnell. And there are a lot of similarities between the things in the book that I describe in detail in legal thriller fashion. I mean, the story just simply lends itself to reading like a legal thriller. And it is one, except it's all true. You have to keep pinching yourself to realize it's true. I was a federal prosecutor for over about 10 years in 3 different districts across the United States, under 9 or 10 United States attorneys from both political parties. The conduct I saw that I felt compelled to write about in License to Lie was egregious prosecutorial misconduct that led Department of Justice officials to make up charges and make up facts. At the same time, they hid the truth against Merrill Lynch executives and sent 4 men to prison on an indictment that didn't even state a criminal offense. And that's exactly the situation that occurred in the McDonnell indictment. It simply didn't allege conduct that was criminal. And an 8-0 Supreme Court recently held so, forcing the government to dismiss the indictment against former Governor McDonnell.
So do you know the name? I forget his name. I don't have it handy. Who was the chief lead federal prosecutor in this case? Frank something. I got to look it up.
I know it was under the United States Attorney, but it was for the Eastern District of Virginia, I believe, but it was also under the Public Integrity section of the Department of Justice, which did virtually the same thing against former Republican Senator Ted Stevens, the longest-serving Republican in the United States Senate, and I talk about that case in my book also. There are a lot of similarities between the Stevens prosecution and the McDonnell prosecution.
Now, I want you to help our audience understand this, Sidney, because we predicted McDonnell would get exonerated 8-0, and he did. But what was shocking to me, and I really haven't shook this, okay, was that the Supreme Court decision was pretty clear. He got exonerated 8-0. And then last week, doing the right thing, the Justice Department decided to drop all charges. Well, that makes sense because the Supreme Court ruled 8-0, right? So that made sense. What has really riveted me is the chief prosecutor for the United States government, and understand how powerful this is. In the McDonnell case, the United States government was pining wanted to retry the case, was blasting the Justice Department for not allowing him to do that because obviously he got overruled by his superiors who said, you don't have a case. We're not going to spend all this money. McDonnell's no threat to anybody, so no. So his supervisors overruled him. But had they not done that, this guy would be right now retrying both Bob and Maureen McDonnell. And so I just found that to be shocking that his supervisors would have to overrule him, and he's in this position, and you look at the facts and you say, is this just vendetta? Is it just power? Is it just, I'm going to prove that I was right? I mean, what was that about? That's scary to me.
It is very scary.
Am I right in interpreting this? I mean, nobody's talked about this, but here's a guy that if somebody over his head had not overruled him, he would be retrying this entire case. Isn't that scary?
Oh, sure. That is fairly common for these overzealous, pumped-up prosecutors that think they're God and they're the only ones that can see right or wrong, and they want to get somebody. I mean, I think McDonnell was essentially targeted. They made up something that wasn't a crime and indicted him for it. You can read the indictment in detail. It's a lengthy indictment, but find where it actually alleges any conduct that was criminal. It doesn't. It wasn't a crime under Virginia law, and it wasn't a crime under federal law. And what I find absolutely amazing and appalling is the Supreme Court decision turns on the definition of bribery under the bribery statute, what an official act is under the bribery statute. Well, he wasn't indicted for bribery. They made it sound like that, but they indicted him under this very vague statute called the Honest Services Statute. And they didn't indict him under the bribery statute 201, even though the Supreme Court talks about the language in that statute and the whole decision turns on that. They didn't indict him for bribery because they didn't have what's called a quid pro quo. I mean, to bribe somebody, you have to get them to do something they're not supposed to do in return for payment of money or some, special favor. Well, they didn't really have a bribery case, so they didn't prosecute it under the bribery statute. Instead, they tried to finagle it under the Honest Services Statute. It's another just made-up prosecution.
So why do they do this? I mean, you go through law school, you become a prosecutor, you think you want to do the right thing. I mean, the Stevens thing, okay, that was horrible. That was politically motivated. But you get a lot of these cases like the one that you mentioned that, had to do with Merrill Lynch and others. I mean, why would a prosecutor with all this power manipulate things in order to get a conviction when somebody didn't do anything wrong? I mean, what's the objective of that?
Well, as I talk about in License to Lie, exposing corruption in the Department of Justice, sometimes they do it for their own ego. Sometimes they do it for a political agenda. Sometimes they do it to get on the front page of the newspaper. I mean, Justice Scalia at one point made a reference to headline-grabbing prosecutors. That seems to be more and more the thing of the day, is prosecutors wanting to see their names in the newspapers, and unfortunately it produces for them seven-figure incomes at international law firms and positions like Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of the Department of Justice, or the President's longest-serving White House counsel, who, by the way, now represents the Clinton Foundation. That would be Catherine Rumler, who's in the book. They have risen to positions of great power in this administration, and these are prosecutors who made up crimes and hid evidence and sent innocent people to prison. So
let's go back to, by the way, we're with Sidney Powell, and she's the author of the book License to Lie, about overzealous federal prosecutors. Sidney, remember the lacrosse case and what was it?
Yeah, the Duke lacrosse case.
The Duke lacrosse case. Now, that prosecutor was proven to have done everything wrong, right? Made up evidence and hid evidence in order to put forth something. But then this is all proved to be prosecutorial manipulation. Whatever happened to him? Did he ever get punished for that?
The Duke lacrosse prosecutor was actually disbarred. But that is a rarity. In fact, we had a horrible case in Texas called the Michael Morton case, where Michael Morton was sent to prison for 25 years, to state prison for the alleged murder of his wife, while the prosecutor hid the bloody bandana and other evidence that showed Michael Morton was innocent. And that prosecutor became a state court judge before we finally the defense was finally able to get the DNA evidence and showed that Michael Morton was innocent. Meanwhile, the real criminal was out there and murdered someone else. And that district attorney, after 25 years and then becoming a state court judge, was finally disbarred. He submitted his law license, turned it in, and the only penalty he suffered other than that was 5 days in the county jail in return for Michael Morton's 25 years in prison.
Unbelievable.
It's very rare for a prosecutor to be even sanctioned in any way despite their misconduct. And you talk about their willingness to prosecute Governor McDonnell again. That happened to the Merrill Lynch defendants. It happened to any number of Enron defendants. Some of them prosecuted as many as 3 times and wound up pleading guilty to crimes they didn't commit because they just simply couldn't take it anymore. I mean, we're talking about prosecution that spans a decade for some of these people.
Mm-hmm. It's a lot of power they have. Now, isn't there a law circulating? It's not a law, but legislation, I should say, circulating in the California General Assembly coming up in 2017 that would actually put a statute on the California books that prosecutorial misconduct would result in bad things happening to them, as far as then they would go to jail. Is that something that you could see might be the answer to this?
I think we do need something like that. Right now, prosecutors have what's called sovereign immunity. They cannot be sued by anyone, even though the person has been wrongly imprisoned. And I think that certainly needs to be abolished. There should certainly be an ability to sue a prosecutor civilly and take money from them for intentional misconduct. And frankly, their intentional misconduct in making up crimes and hiding evidence is also obstruction of justice. Mm-hmm. And it could be prosecuted as that if we had a Department of Justice with enough integrity to do that. Unfortunately, we've had a Department of Justice under Eric Holder and now Ms. Lynch that actually protect the corrupt prosecutors. The prosecutors in the Stevens case, who unseated the longest-serving Republican in the United States Senate and effectively changed the balance of power in the Senate and enabled the enactment of Obamacare, they got, I think they only served 1 day of a suspension. One was supposedly suspended for 30 days, one for 14 days, but one of them only served 1 day of that suspension without pay. They both still work in the United States Attorney's offices on the West Coast.
Well, they're probably looked at by the Obama administration as heroes, right?
No doubt. It's astounding.
Well, you just made a hit here with my wife, the Fräulein, who just texted me and said, I want to read her book. Be sure to ask the best way to get it. So how does Ann get your book?
Well, the only way to get it really is either to order it from me as a third-party seller on Amazon or to order it from my website, licensed2lie.com, where I can also do autographed and inscribed copies and get them out to people. Barnes & Noble has refused to put it on the bookshelves. The
Why?
New York Post was going to write an article about it and reached out to Department of Justice for comment and pulled the article. I mean, this is a book the White House and the Department of Justice do not want people reading because it's all true. It names names, and I uploaded the supporting documents to the website licensed2lie.com. And they are livid about it, absolutely livid. They're trying to kill it with silence.
Wow. So you can't get your book out on bookshelves. I mean, look, it's a competitive environment. This is capitalism. So if people will buy your book, why wouldn't bookstores take it?
I don't know. All I know is that when the New York Post reached out to Department of Justice for comment on the article they were going to write on the book 2 years ago, the article disappeared.
No kidding. So when you've tried to get your book marketed on shelves, what's the answer that you get back?
Often I don't get an answer at all, and they just say they're not interested.
All right, everybody needs to go buy this book. I'm telling you, we don't hawk a lot of things online. I have not read the book. I'm going to buy it. And if you're listening, go order this now. Sidney, what's your website?
The website is licensed2lie.com. And the book is also available through Amazon, but they won't give me the buy box. You have to go to see third-party sellers and look for Sidney Powell, PC, as a third-party seller. And if they tell you it's out of stock, that's not true. We've had that happen, too. There are plenty of them there. In fact, they charge me out the wazoo to keep them there.
So Amazon won't even let you buy the book right through them?
No.
Unbelievable. Okay, so you want to go to licensed2lie.com. licensed2lie.com. And I assume when you go there, Sidney, there's just an easy button there to pay and buy for the book?
Yes, there is.
All right, go to licensed2lie.com. Ann's going to buy one now. You know, I've had you on a bunch of times. I never really knew the story that your book has been blocked from a sale by Amazon and B. Dalton and other bookstores. I just find that shocking, but I certainly I don't doubt it. Let me just put it that way. I mean, and one of the scary things about this, I mean, federal prosecutors, they have unlimited resources. I mean,
they have unlimited resources, and the prosecutors I talk about in the book and name by name became Obama's longest-serving White House counsel, One became deputy director of the FBI and is now back in the Department of Justice in the corporate fraud section. Leslie Caldwell, the current head of the Department of Justice Criminal Division, was the prosecutor who destroyed Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs for nothing, only to be reversed by the Supreme Court 9-0 for the same reasons the McDonnell indictment was just thrown out. And Lisa Monaco, the president's counterterrorism advisor during his entire term, I believe, she was one of the Enron task force prosecutors who was implicated in all kinds of prosecutorial misconduct. I'm telling you, these people have been running the country in very high positions for the last 7 years.
Okay, go to
and
license.
They're still there.
Go to license2lie.com, and you can order Sidney's book there. Also, Ann says, email me your name and address, and Ann will send you Trump bumper stickers just because you did. So that's John, JOHN, at jfradioshow.com. So you got my wife all fired up, Sidney.
Awesome. That's great. And they can follow me on Twitter at Sidney Powell, the number 1, SIDNEY, POWELL, numeral 1. And I write a blog at seekingjustice.org. The blog is behind because I've been writing a lot of articles for the New York Observer in which I've exposed all kinds of government misconduct. In fact, I wound up breaking the news that IRS had destroyed Lois Lerner's BlackBerry on purpose after the computer crash and everything else.
All right, we're going to have you back. I'm out of time, and this is a big story, and you got my wife all fired up, so go buy this book, license2lie.com. And remember, Sidney, my motto to life. You know what it is?
Nope.
Happy wife, happy life. This is
That's
the John
very
Fredericks.
True.
This is the John Fredericks Radio Network.